Hello and welcome back to the Art of Splatoon. Today I'll be covering every weapon in the game as well as how to play each of the 4 Anarchy modes. If you're new to the series, please be sure to check out episodes 1 and 2. With that out of the way, let's dive right into the video. Before I go into the weapons, I'd like to point out a few things that are going to be mentioned quite a bit throughout this video. Every main weapon is assigned a weight class. Using a light weapon allows you to swim and run faster, regular weapons don't change anything, and heavy weapons slow you down. Pretty simple, just wanted to get that out there. I also wanted to briefly touch on weapon kits, which are pretty simple. Basically every main weapon comes with a sub and special weapon. Some kits have a lot of synergy with each other and others don't, but you can still make crazy plays if you take the time to learn the weapon. Anyways, I'm going to start off with sub weapons since I'll be mentioning a few of them when I go over the main weapons. Splat Bomb. This is the sub weapon. It is the sub weapon that comes with the Splatshot Jr., so it's the first one you'll be acquainted with. When thrown, like many sub weapons, you can see a trajectory line before releasing the R button to see where it will go and land. When a Splat Bomb explodes, it has a lethal damage hitbox that will splat opponents in just one shot, and it will have a larger 30 damage hitbox that can create a nice combo with certain main weapons like the Slosher. After landing, the Splat Bomb will blow up 1 second after touching the ground, and it will only explode when on the ground, so you can pull off some really funny things with them. Pair that with its ink cost of 70% and you can pull off some really amazing plays. Suction Bomb. This sub is very similar to the Splat Bomb, however, this one will stick to almost any surface you throw it on. It will then blow up after 2 seconds of being stuck to whatever surface it's stuck to. It has a larger explosion radius than the Splat Bomb, and it can really surprise enemies if they don't see it. Or it can be stuck in really good spots like the tower and tower control. The ink cost is a little high, still at 70%, but it is one of the better subs in the game. Burst Bomb. This sub is like a water balloon. It blows up immediately upon hitting any surface. It doesn't deal as much damage as the Suction or Splat Bombs, but its very low ink cost of 45% and combo potential make this one of, if not, the best sub weapon in the game. It can hit someone directly to deal 60 damage or have an indirect damage output that's a bit lower. Curling Bomb. This has great utility. Whether you want to follow its trail or use it as a bomb, this sub-weapon can do a lot. You can hold the R button for a bit to charge it up before releasing. When you just tap R, it will travel straight along the ground and bounce off any walls until the lights on the top of it turn red, then it will explode. It has pretty small damage radius, but using the aforementioned charge ability, you can make it travel less distance in exchange for a larger explosion. There's not much of an indicator, nor is there any kind of charge level, so you just kinda have to release it whenever you want, or just let it manually go off and detonate right in front of you. Curling bombs use 65% of your ink tank as well, which isn't too bad considering it's a bomb with a lethal damage radius. Auto Bomb. After landing, these little guys will use sonar to look for nearby enemies. If it finds any, it will walk towards them to track them down and then blow up either when it reaches its target, or if it doesn't make it, it will just explode after it gives up. It only uses 55% of your ink tank, so it can be used a lot in fights, or you can use some sub saver to throw 2 at once. It's a useful sub, but it doesn't always splat people. It does a great job of locating the enemy and putting pressure on the enemy to get them to move so they don't get blown up by its small but lethal explosion. Torpedo. This is a great sub-weapon for its many use cases. It costs 65% of your ink tank, which isn't terrible. When thrown, it will look for enemies in the air and lock onto their location. It will then change shape as it locks on, then fly to that location, marked by a little circle on the ground, wall, or ceiling. It can be shot down when it's locked onto someone, so it's best to use it when you're already shooting at the enemy so they can't shoot both you and your torpedo down. It can also be rolled on the ground or off walls. When the torpedo hits a surface, it will no longer be able to lock onto enemies, so you can use it to have a smaller explosion that cannot be shot down. Fizzy Bomb. This sub-weapon is pretty unique as it can be charged up through several different ways. You can shake the controller, mash the B button, and by walking back and forth really quickly. It only uses 60% of your ink tank too, so it's pretty easy to have enough sub saver to throw 2 on 1 ink tank. When thrown without a charge, the Fizzy Bomb will fly through the air, leaving a trail of ink under it that you can swim through, similar to the Curling Bomb. When it lands, it explodes in a non-lethal, smallish radius. If you charge at one level, it will leave a slightly thicker line of ink under it, and when it lands, it will explode. with the same radius as the uncharged Fizzy, but then instead of going away, it will bounce ahead a bit and explode again with a slightly larger radius. If you fully charge it to its second charge level, when you throw it, it will leave behind an even thicker trail and will explode and bounce, then explode again like the second charge level, but then bounce up again and explode again in an even bigger radius. Fizzy bombs are really good for dealing some damage to enemies for combos and catching enemies off guard, and splatting them while sneaking up on them. This sub is generally regarded as one of the best sub weapons in the game, right up there with burst bombs. Ink Mine. The ink mine is completely invisible to the enemy. You place it in ink and it will wait there until it is inked over or an enemy steps in its danger radius. It deals 45 damage and marks the enemy so that everyone on your team can see them when they've been hit. It uses only 60% of your ink tank, so it can be used quickly in succession. You can only place 2 ink mines at a time, and if you place a third, the oldest mine will detonate. So you kinda have to set things up like this triple ink mine combo, which is really fun. Or if you have teammates with mines, you can set up an entire minefield to destroy your enemies. Angle Shooter. By far the hardest sub weapon to use. The Angle Shooter is the only sub weapon that can be thrown far enough to outrange the E-Leader, the longest ranged main weapon in the game. Aiming this is really hard, but if you manage to land a shot, it deals 40 damage and marks them the same way the ink mine does. Angle shooters are unaffected by gravity and will bounce off walls, ceilings, and floors. It uses 40% of your ink tank, so you can throw 2 on a full ink tank, and it's possible with enough sub saver to throw 3 at once. So if you're really good, you can hit all 3 in a row to splat someone. Otherwise, it works well for comboing with your main weapon. Not the best sub weapon by any means, but it's still definitely fun once you figure out how to use it. Point Sensor. This sub takes the locating part of the ink mine and angle shooter, but makes it its entire identity. When thrown, it creates a field that marks anyone inside of it for a while longer than the ink mine or angle shooter does. It's a very useful sub weapon for getting exact locations on all your enemies for all your teammates. It has great utility for checking to see if an enemy is hiding in a certain area, and it just works well with having teammates that know where opponents are. It only uses 45% of your ink tank too, so it can be thrown twice in quick succession. Toxic Mist. This sub creates a similar field to the point sensor, however it doesn't mark enemies, instead it slows them down and drains their ink. You can also see people in the ink in the mist because of this little effect on them. It uses 60% of your ink tank, so it's pretty spammable, but it's better to throw it in choke points or at enemies that are trying to rush you down or run away from you. It's a great sub for slowing down enemies and trapping them. Splash Wall. The Splash Wall creates sort of a mini shield that you can deploy. There isn't a trajectory line, so you kinda have to guess how far it will go until you get used to it. It uses 60% of your ink tank, so you can continue to fight after throwing one out. It's a great sub for very aggressive weapons and for defensive weapons. Do be careful though, as most explosives will detonate instantly if they touch the splash wall. It's a great sub for holding ground. Sprinkler. This sub inks the ground. It doesn't do much in terms of damaging enemies, but it can be thrown in a lot of different areas to help ink the ground, and hard to reach areas too, because the enemy can destroy them. It uses 60% of your ink tank as well, so you can use it to quickly paint the ground beneath your feet to try to escape a bad situation. You can only have one active at a time, however, so if you throw a second one, the first one will disappear. It's a good sub though, so you can place it in a lot of different areas to help your team. Squid Beacon. This is the most expensive sub weapon in the game, using 75% of your ink tank, but you won't be using this in active combat much. This is more of a strategic sub weapon. When you place one of these down, it allows you to super jump to it. The enemy can shoot them and to destroy them and potentially camp your jump, so try to place them in hidden areas or areas that the enemy will have a hard time reaching. They're kinda strange, so I'll explain a little bit more on how they work. Firstly, you'll notice when you set one down that there are 2 red flashing lights on top, and if you open your map, you can see the 2 dots on top of the beacon. If a teammate that does not have beacons for their sub weapon jumps to it, you'll notice that now only 1 light is flashing and there's only 1 dot on the map. If anyone jumps to it again, it will break. However, if you, the user, or someone else that has squid beacons as their subs jump to it, it will always break right away, so you can set another one up right after you land. You can use the map to see which beacons only have 1 jump left, so you know which ones to replace. The Squid Beacon has one other big utility as well, and that is that it can scan its surroundings to check for enemies. If you open the map, you'll notice any nearby enemies to the Squid Beacon are visible. I'll just mention one thing about the map real quick while we're talking about it. If an opponent has taken at least 30 damage, they will be visible on the map as well, so once you figure out using the map in the middle of fights, you can quickly check the map to see where a damaged enemy is hiding. Once they recover below 30 damage, they won't be visible anymore, but it's a super useful tool, especially at a high level of play. And one more thing about squid beacons is that you can only place 3 at a time. If you place a 4th, the oldest one will then break, similar to ink mines or sprinklers. Anyways, that's all the sub-weapons covered. On to the main weapons. Shooters. These weapons are your basic press ZR and ink bolts come out type weapons. The Splattershot Jr. as well as any of the other splatter shots are essentially the face of this weapon class. However, it is probably the most diverse of all the weapon classes simply because of the sheer variety of main weapon types in it. So let's go over all of them. Splattershot Jr. This is probably the most basic of all the shooters. It's a lightweight weapon with a pretty wide shot spread. This subclass, if you will, is called a sprayer shooter. They are weapons that aren't very accurate but tend to be able to put a lot of paint on the ground. The Splattershot Jr. is also unique in that when using it, it increases the capacity of your ink tank without the need of any gear abilities. It's very good at using a lot of sub-weapons and painting for its teammates. It takes 4 shots to splat as well. It's a very versatile weapon with strengths that outweigh its weaknesses. Sploosh-o-matic. This is another lightweight sprayer type weapon, however it excels at speed, even more so than the Splattershot Jr. Its main job is to rush in and splat people. It has very short range, so being able to close the gap is super important. The sploosh is also great at painting at close range, although painting isn't typically its main focus. You want to try to create openings for your teammates and distract the enemy. It takes only 3 shots to splat. It's a very good weapon in the right hands. Arrow Spray. This is the second to last of the lightweight sprayer type weapons. The Arrow Spray is one of the best weapons for painting in the game. It has the fastest fire rate of all the shooters, and it's tied at taking the most shots to splat someone, that being 5. It can be kind of hard to use in fighting because of its very wide shot spread, but I am someone who will push this weapon as much as I can. The Colors Arrow Spray kit has burst bombs, which can really help with its fighting potential. However, the other 2 arrow sprays aren't much of a pushover as some people claim they are. This weapon can be versatile, but it's really hard to use effectively at a higher level. You want to prioritize painting for your teammates and using lots of special weapons. Splattershot. This weapon is one of the most versatile and effective weapons in the entire game. The Splattershot takes 3 shots to splat someone and has a narrower shot spread than spray shooters, as well as a bit more range. The Splattershot can paint well, and it can do well enough when it comes to fighting. Its range is pretty average, more so than the spray shooters, but still pretty short ranged overall. So closing the gap on enemies is super important. N-Zap. It's another great weapon. It excels at painting a bit more than the Splattershot, and also has a faster fire rate at the cost of taking 4 shots to splat instead of 3. It has a pretty narrow shot spread as well. It also has really good strafe speed, meaning it can run faster while shooting than most weapons. The N-Zap 85 is a really good weapon as a supporter because it can use its Tacticooler special very frequently. It has a similar range value to the Splattershot. 52 Gal. This weapon is very powerful. It has a bit of a wider shot spread, so it doesn't always land its shots right away, but it only takes 2 shots to splat, so it can deal some massive damage in a hurry. Paired with its vanilla kit's Splash Wall sub, it becomes like a tank. The 52 Gal is another semi-short range shooter with a somewhat similar range to the Splattershot. Splash-O-Matic. This weapon excels at painting, and it's the most accurate shooter weapon in the game. It has 0 shot spread, so the shots will go exactly where you aim, and there's no luck involved. The Splash is a bit shorter range than the Splattershot, but it makes up for that with its massive painting potential and lack of shot deviation. It also has a pretty quick fire rate, and it takes 4 shots to splat. Splattershot Pro. This is the first of the longer range shooters. It's what I would call as the best introduction to the long range shooters. It has a pretty narrow shot spread, but it uses a bit more ink and has a bit of a slower fire rate compared to some of the other shooters we've gone over. It also takes 3 shots to splat, so it can still splat an enemy pretty quick at a good distance. It's also pretty mobile for a mid-ranged weapon. Overall, it's pretty versatile. 96 Gal. It's like the older sibling of the 52 Gal. It has longer range, it deals more damage, but is pretty slow, and it has the same shot deviation problems as the 52. It does deal a bit more damage than it, but it still takes 2 shots to splat someone. It's a really good weapon in the right hands, but it takes a bit more practice to get good with it. Jet Squelcher. This is the longest range shooter in the game. It has pretty decent fire rate and it paints pretty well. It's a great weapon that can support its team without having to move in too much. It takes 4 shots to splat, and with its pretty narrow shot spread, it can get some pretty decent splats from afar. Splattershot Nova. This weapon is the newest addition to the shooter class. It is sort of a mix between a spray shooter and has similar range to the Splattershot Pro 96 Gal. It paints pretty well, but its shot spread makes it pretty inaccurate, and it takes a whopping 5 shots to splat like the arrow spray. However, this one does have a slower fire rate, so staying back with this weapon to support the team and land a few shots here or there is what this weapon really excels at. It's also a sprayer just like the arrow sprayer, the sploosh, but with its longer range it makes it pretty unique. That's it for the shooter class, except with shooters, there is sort of a subclass that changes it up quite a bit, but is still technically a shooter. Semi-automatics. L3 Nozzle Nose. This is the first of the semi-automatic shooters. When using this weapon, you might notice how you can't just hold down ZR like with other shooters. The semi-autos fire either one shot or a small burst of shots per tap of the ZR button. The L3 fires 3 shots per tap and can refire in quick succession. It takes 4 shots to splat someone, so it only takes 2 taps. It has the perfect accuracy like the Splash-O-Matic from earlier, however when jumping its accuracy does get a bit worse. It's a pretty mobile and fast weapon, and its range value is pretty decent and paints pretty well. It's a very versatile weapon that can do a lot of things once you get used to it. H3 Nozzle Nose. This weapon is essentially a longer ranged, slower version of the L3. It can actually one-tap opponents because it only takes 3 shots to splat someone. Listen to this amazing noise that's so satisfying when you land with one tap. And like I said, it is a bit slower, so it's not as mobile, but it can still paint really well, especially with its Viper kit that comes with suction bombs and triple ink strike. The other 2 kits are good too, so try them out. It has the same perfect accuracy as the L3, but it even keeps its accuracy when jumping. It is probably the second hardest shooter semi-auto weapon to learn, so it takes a lot of practice to get good with this one, but I tell you, it's worth it. Squeezer. Probably the hardest semi-auto weapon and shooter to master. It shoots 1 time per tap and it takes 3 shots to splat someone. It has perfect accuracy as well, even in the air. It also has pretty long range, but it uses a lot of ink, and it can be really difficult to aim. This weapon is even more dynamic, however, as it has a secondary firing mode. If instead of tapping you hold down ZR, the Squeezer will actually switch to a shorter range, less accurate painting mode. Since the long range mode doesn't paint much, this is helpful to make up for that, although it still doesn't paint that much compared to some weapons. In its painting mode, it takes 4 shots to splat someone, so it's typically not ideal to try to shoot people in this mode. Overall though, this weapon is so good that a lot of competitive players have believed it to be the best weapon in the game at least one point or another. Nintendo recently came out with an update where they adjusted the Squeezer so that it couldn't shoot quite as fast in its long range mode, which has definitely hurt it a bit, but a good Squeezer you can totally wreak havoc on a match. That's it for all the shooters and semi-automatic weapons. That's the biggest weapon class out of the way, so let's move on to the rest of the weapon classes. Rollers. These are essentially giant paint rollers that can flick ink by pressing ZR, as well as roll around by holding ZR. Most of them can run people over in one go, and one-shot people with their ink flicking capabilities. They can also semi-transform to flick ink in a vertical swing that is more narrow but can splat people from further away. And they do this by jumping first and pressing ZR while still in the air. Splat Roller. The most basic of the roller class, a great introduction to rollers, and one of the better weapons in the game. The Splat Roller has the typical 2 flicking modes, both are pretty quick to fling, and rolling with this weapon is pretty speedy as well. It can one-shot splat people with both of its flinging modes, and it can run people over in one go. It's a great weapon that doesn't use a lot of ink, and it's good for people who love to sneak around the map and jump scare their enemies. Carbon Roller. This is the lightest roller type in the game. It is also the fastest. It can one-shot people with both of its flicking modes, but at a shorter range than the regular Splat Roller. The Carbon Roller Deco is really good because it has burst bombs, and they make it possible to splat someone from much further away. The Carbon Roller loves to be stealthy and really close to enemies, but it doesn't paint very well and it can't roll people over unless they've taken a bit of damage first. But it can also run much faster while rolling than any other roller. Its trail is just a bit thinner. Overall, the Carbon Roller can be a very good weapon, although hard to use. Dynamo Roller. This roller is the opposite of the Carbon Roller. This heavy powerhouse takes forever to swing and even longer to swing vertically, but it can fling further and splat at a longer distance than any other roller. The reason why it's so heavy is because it actually has an engine in it to help it fling ink further. It does use quite a bit of ink though, and it can be a bit inconsistent. It's heavy, but it has quite a bit of power to make up for that. It creates a threat level like no other roller. Flings a Roller. This roller is really unique because it actually shapeshifts to a degree, and this helps it fling ink on its vertical flicks much further and wider. This roller takes no time at all to fling normally, but its vertical fling takes a bit of time. It really helps paint the map though, and help its teammates out from a little ways away. This is one of the more versatile rollers that can play both the front lines and the back lines effectively. Big Swig Roller. This roller is the best painting roller in the game, but it is also pretty weak when it comes to fighting. It can't one-shot splat someone with its horizontal flick. In fact, it's the only roller that can't. It can with its vertical flick, however, but it is narrower than any other roller, so it takes more skill and aim to land it. It also has a lot of range with its vertical, so it can be good to flick at people from a safe distance to chip away at them, or just go in real close and finish them off in just one flick. It generally takes 3 flicks or 2 vertical flicks to splat someone, but it can paint the stage pretty quick with its horizontal flicks. Its roll also covers the widest amount of ground in the game. Even though its power is a bit lower, it can still make up for it with its lightness, painting ability, and poking with its vertical swing. And that's all the rollers. There's a lot of variety and a lot of fun to be had with these weapons. Up next is Chargers. This weapon class has main weapons that hold ZR to charge and fill a circle reticle and then release for a powerful shot with decent range. They are also categorized by their sniper-like designs as well as their lasers and powerful singular long-range shots that can pick people off from a long ways away, and their difficulty to use. Splat Charger, the basic introductory charger. It's the first one that Sheldon lets you buy, and it's really good. You can shoot tap shots by tapping ZR to help you paint around you, and you can hold ZR to charge it. You can tell it's fully charged when the circle on the reticle has made it all the way around and you hear a little beep. Once it's fully charged, you can shoot pretty far, and if you manage to hit opponent with this full charge, you will splat them in just one shot. You can also charge up behind a wall, and while holding ZR, you can go into Squid form with a stored charge and pop out to splat someone. Splatter Scope. This weapon is very similar to the Splat Charger, even so similar that they have the same kits. However, this one has a scope. The scope is really useful for hitting faraway opponents. However, some prefer the regular charger because it's subjective which one is better. The Splatter Scope does lose the ability to hold a charge in ink, but it does have a bit more range than the Splat Charger to make up for it. Squiffer. This is your lightweight charger. It is super mobile for a charger, and it can charge at full speed in the air, which is a mechanic that out of all the chargers, only the Squiffer is privileged enough to have. This allows you to jump around while charging to make it harder for enemies to hit you. The Squiffer is also the shortest range charger, so having the mobility is really helpful. It can also hold a charge like the Splat Charger, so the Squiffer is a short-ranged mobile powerhouse. E-Liter 4K. This is a heavy charger. It also has the most range out of all the main weapons in the game. The E-Liter is a threat that can loom over the stage from quite a ways away. It takes a bit longer to charge though, and it can only get 4 fully charged shots off per full ink tank, but its range and one-shot potential really make it a great weapon. It also has the charge hold, so you can charge from safety and then pop out and catch your enemies on the fly. This weapon should prioritize staying back, away from enemy fire, and providing a good place for your teammates to super jump to, and by putting pressure on the enemy team by assisting your teammates. E-Liter 4K Scope. Much like the regular E-Liter, except it has the scope. Just like the Splat Charger and Splatter Scope, this one has slightly more range, but no charge hold ability. I typically prefer this one because the scope and extra range are very useful to me, but again, it's subjective, so pick the one that suits you. Bamboozler 14. This is a very weird charger. It can't one-shot splat anyone. even with a full charge. However, its charge time is unmatched. It can fire many fully charged shots very quickly, and it gets 14 shots off on a full ink tank without any ink save remaining. It can't hold a charge, but with how fast it charges, it really doesn't need one. It was always one of my favorite chargers, but it's a very difficult weapon to master. Goo Tuber. This is another weird charger. It specializes in the charge hold ability and the unique ability to splat someone in one shot without fully charging. The reticle looks a bit different because it goes around twice instead of the usual one time. This is to help you gauge when you have enough charged up to deal enough damage to splat someone in one shot. The extra charge after just adds a bit of range and to the amount of ink it puts out, and it allows it to pierce. Snipe Rider, the newest charger to the series, this weapon is an absolute powerhouse. It has been so good that top level teams have won in just about every team composition. It takes a bit to charge, and once it's charged you'll be able to shoot 5 times before you have to recharge again. The shots only deal 68 damage, so it takes 2 shots, but the amount of damage it does is enough to make a combo with a lot of other weapons. It also has about the same range value as the splatter scope, so it can really put the pressure on from a good distance away. And with that, I've gone over all the charges. They are sure some of the hardest weapons to use, but I can assure you that they are also some of the most dangerous and rewarding weapons in the game. Sloshers. They are buckets that fling ink out of them to slosh the enemies back to their spawn zones. They are really unique weapons and really fun, and they aren't necessarily too difficult as a weapon class. You just tap ZR each time you want to swing the bucket. Slosher. This is the regular slosher. It may be basic, but boy is it tough. It only takes 2 hits to splat an opponent, and it has pretty decent range and good painting potential. It can also lob shots, like with any other slosher, so it excels at hitting people over walls and under ledges. It can also curve shots, but that's pretty hard, so I'll be going over that in another video. Overall, it's a great main weapon with a balanced fire rate and range. Slosher. This is your lightweight slosher, except what makes it different, other than its faster fire speed in shorter range, is that it flings ink in 3 directions at once rather than the typical one. The 2 shots that come out on the side have slightly less range, but they really help for pouring out the damage to multiple enemies at once, or if you miss your targets a lot, or if you're just trying to hit someone over a ledge. The Tri usually wants to be a pretty aggressive and up-close weapon, so it's great for people that love to get the most splats in a game. Sloshing Machine. This weapon is made from a washing machine, and it really accentuates this fact by the fact that it flings ink in swirls in the air and can easily hit multiple people at once. There's also a sweet spot in the middle of its projectile that makes a noise similar to the charger hitting a fully charged shot, and hitting this shot does do more damage, but ends the projectile. Normally the sloshing machine takes 3 shots to splat with, however if you hit a direct it will only take 2 regardless of the second shot is a standard hit or another direct. It's a really fun weapon with a good area of effect capability. X-Slosher. This is the heavyweight slosher, however instead of just flinging ink, this one actually shoots explosive heated globs of ink that explode when they hit a surface. This weapon also has quite a bit of range and loves to play the angles. If you hit someone 3 times with the explosions, they will get splatted. However, somewhat like the sloshing machine, you can get a direct hit with the glob itself that does extra damage, and the damage stacks with the explosion damage, so you can take down an enemy in just 2 flings if you aim well enough. It is a really good weapon for painting for your teammates as well as using a lot of specials. Just be wary of your ink tank because it does use a lot of ink. Bloblobber. This weapon is probably one of the most odd weapons in the game. It is the only weapon that can bounce its shots off walls. When you fling the Bloblobber, 4 bubbles will come out, and they'll bounce along the ground until they've traveled a long enough distance or hit a player. If all 4 bubbles hit someone at once, they will be splatted, and if not, you can just continually fire 4 bubbles at a time. It's a great, really fun weapon, and it paints a pretty good amount, so use it to support your team, ink the ground, and get a lot of splats and assists. Dreadringer. This weapon is a lot like the Slosher, but it's actually a bit slower with longer range. However, when swung, it flings 2 sloshers in the same area, with a second slosh being slightly delayed behind the first one. The first slosh also deals a tiny bit more damage than the second, but it will always just take 3 hits to secure a splat. It's a really fun weapon for slosher lovers, and it has a lot of potential. And that's all the sloshers. It's a fun and interesting weapon class, also probably my favorite if I had to choose. Splatlings. On to the next, Splatlings. These are essentially Gatling machine guns that can tear apart the enemy with high damage and usually long range and fast fire rates. They also require you to charge them up before firing, similar to chargers in that sense, although they typically don't quite match the range of chargers and tend to play pretty differently. Heavy Splatling. This is your basic Splatling. Hold down ZR to charge. Filling its first charge ring increases its range and duration of fire, and filling the second ring just increases the duration of fire even more. This applies to just about every Splatling. Once charged, releasing the ZR button will have the Splatling unleash a volley of shots until its duration runs out. It takes 4 shots to splat with the heavy, so having its fast fire rate and long range makes it a force to be reckoned with. Mini Splatling. This is your short-ranged, lightweight Splatling. It has about the same range of the Splattershot Nova, but it can move much faster than the other Splatlings, as well as its charge time being so short that you don't even need to hold down the ZR button to charge it for a full second before it's ready to go. Of course, the charge doesn't last as long, but it's definitely long enough to get the job done. And you can always just charge it up again. It takes just 4 shots to splat, just like the heavy, and the mini is a similar fire rate to the heavy. It does use quite a bit of ink though, so do be careful there. Hydra Splatling. This is your longer ranged heavyweight weapon. It doesn't move too quickly, but it can reach really far, and when this thing is fully charged, you better stay out of its line of sight. The Hydra is also pretty unique in the fact that it can take 4 shots to splat just like the other Splatlings. However, if you do fill the second charge ring completely, the damage of the shots increases enough so that it only takes 3 shots to splat. Combine that with its fast fire rate and very long range, you might find yourself having a hard time dealing with it. Getting it to move is its biggest weakness, and it takes forever to charge up. And like other Splatlings, it can't hold its charge in the ink. Still a very powerful and scary weapon in the right hands. Heavy Edit Splatling. This is the last of what I would call the normal Splatlings, as this one is similar to the other 3 in a few ways. It has slightly less range than the heavy Splatling, but it has a really interesting mechanic where the longer you charge it, the faster it shoots. If you don't complete the first charge ring, it will have a slower fire rate, but if you fill past it, its fire rate will increase significantly. It also takes 4 shots to splat. It has really good mobility too, just a bit worse than the mini in that sense, but it has a bit more range and a longer duration of fire, making for a great, well-balanced Splatling that's good at painting. Ballpoint Splatling. This Splatling is so different from the others. Firstly, it has 2 firing modes, like the squeezer from earlier. This one accesses them differently though. Firstly, the close range mode is essentially mimicking a spray shooter with a really high fire rate and damage, and you can access this mode as soon as you start firing. The second mode, the one you'll likely use just as much, if not a little more, the long range mode, activates after firing for about a quarter of the circle's charge. Both modes take 4 shots to splat, but the short range mode shoots so much faster that it is ideal for close range combat. The other unique thing about this Splatling is that you can start recharging it before letting its charge run all the way out. This is really nice for if you want to stay in the short range mode by letting the charge circle go for a little less than a quarter of the rotation, then filling it back up before it switches firing modes, because recharging resets the firing mode after a short time. For the long range mode, after firing for a bit, you can recharge in little bits at a time to maintain it. You can't charge more than a quarter of its rotation, otherwise it will go back to its short range mode. If you're ever wondering what mode it's in, you can look at the reticle. If it's wide, it's in short range mode, and if it's narrow, it's in long range mode. Or you can look at the back of the Splatling. If the circular part is lit up in a solid circle, it's in long range mode. And if there is a circle that isn't filled in, it's in short range mode. It's definitely a tricky weapon, but it's very powerful and useful. Nautilus. This is another very unique Splatling. It only has 1 firing mode, however it can recharge without needing to run out of charge first, just like the ballpoint. Unlike the ballpoint, however, the Nautilus has the special ability to store a charge at any point of its charge in ink, and the duration is quite long, so you can charge it up a bit, swim in the ink with that full charge, then pop out and unleash a barrage at your enemies. The Nautilus also only takes 4 shots to splat, and it has a pretty quick fire rate and shot velocity, so it'll usually look like you're just melting enemies. And there's all the Splatlings, such a fun and powerful weapon class. Brushes. These flick ink rapidly to slap their enemies in the face to attack, and similar to rollers, have the ability to hold down ZR to run with the brush. However, brush trails are pretty narrow, but are much faster, so they're usually used more for mobility rather than paint. Ink brush. This is the speediest weapon in the game. It's lightweight and it lets you run very quickly while brushing, and it can essentially attack as fast as you can tap with the ZR button. It takes at least 4 flicks to splat someone, but brushes are a bit inconsistent with damage, so sometimes it can take up to 6. The ink brush is good at running behind enemy lines and making problems for the enemy while its teammates move in. A lot of people hate fighting this thing because of its sheer speed and annoyance factor. But I've been told that the ink brush is like an annoying mosquito that buzzes in your ear. Not only is it annoying, it's deadly and super fun to use. Octobrush. This is the standard brush. It's not quite as fast as the ink brush, but it still packs quite a punch, with more range and generally only taking 3 flicks to splat. The Octobrush is also really good at running around the stage quickly, albeit not at the blinding speed of the ink brush. The Octobrush also likes to flank opponents and disrupt the enemy. Paintbrush. This brush really packs a punch, and it can flick ink pretty far. It generally only takes 2 flicks to splat as well. It does use a lot of ink, and it has a little bit of a wind up before it can begin flicking, so you do have to be careful. This is manageable, but your enemies will be glad. The paintbrush can dish out a lot of damage in a hurry, and if the enemy is too close together, well, let's just say you're probably sending all of them back to their spawn zones. And there's all the brushes that we have. There may only be 3, but they're all great weapons, and their capabilities of disrupting the enemy team is pretty much unique to this weapon class. Blasters. These weapons fire large ink bullets that explode and deal area of effect damage after a set distance. Each blaster has its own set distance and explosion size. These weapons are all about finding the proper spacing to be the best at combat, and none of them ink very much at all. All of them can deal explosion damage or direct damage, which is generally much more than the explosion damage, and causes the shot to stop traveling once it hits its target. Blaster. This is your standard blaster. The shots travel a mid-short range distance before exploding in a pretty large radius. It takes 2 shots to splat or 1 direct hit. Its fire rate is pretty slow, but that's like all blasters, so it's really important to make each shot count. It's also pretty slow, so jumping while firing can really help with evading a few enemy shots and increasing your own movement. However, when jumping with any blaster, your shots will get less accurate, so using the ability Intensify Action can be really helpful for jump shots. Range Blaster. This is your slower, longer ranged blaster. The ranged blaster's shot travels a bit further than the blaster's, but it also has a lower fire rate and uses a bit more ink. This weapon is very powerful though. It can also one-shot splat opponents with a direct or 2-shot splat people with its massive explosion hitbox. Luna Blaster. This is the lightweight, close-range blaster. Its shots don't travel very far and have a pretty large explosion hitbox, so it's very useful for close-range combat. It typically 2 shots, but direct hits will one-shot splat opponents as well. It's pretty fast for a blaster, so it's a pretty good weapon that the opponents will definitely be scared of. Rapid Blaster. This weapon is actually longer range than the ranged blaster, as the shot will travel a bit further than the ranged blaster before exploding. It also shoots pretty fast for a blaster. It is a bit weaker though, so taking 3 standard hits to splat an opponent, but directs deal enough damage to take only 2 shots if one of them was a direct. This weapon is really reliant on keeping the proper spacing from the enemy and not letting them close in on you. Up close combat is not a situation you typically want to be in with this weapon. Rapid Blaster Pro. This weapon is a lot like the Rapid Blaster, however it has even more range, albeit a slightly slower fire rate. Its damage numbers are the same. The Rapid Blaster Pro is more of a long-range supporter, being the longest range blaster in the game, where the regular Rapid Blaster is more of a mid-ranged attacker. Flash Blaster. This is the blaster with the biggest explosion radius out of all of them, as well as the fastest fire rate, but it's also the weakest, taking 4 shots to splat, with hitting 1 direct taking the number down to 3 shots, and getting 2 direct hits is enough to splat. This weapon likes to stay behind cover while shooting and around corners to catch enemies off guard and splat them before they can get away or splat the user. It does a really good job of helping teammates out in fights, as well as its little bit of damage can really add up quick when you have a teammate helping you. It's a good weapon when used properly, but it can be really difficult to stay alive with unless you are using cover really well. S-Blast. This is the most unique blaster of the bunch. It has two firing modes, one similar to the blaster, but similar in size to the Clash Blaster, and the other a long range mode, similar in range to the Range Blaster, but has the smallest explosion size out of any blaster. Both firing modes take either 2 shots or 1 direct hit to splat someone. With a similar fire rate to the Range Blaster, it's not the fastest weapon, but it's threatening both up close and far away. In order to switch firing mode, all you have to know is that while firing on the ground, it will shoot in its long range mode, and if you jump or leave the ground before you shoot, it will fire in its short range mode. Overall, this weapon is really good, but fairly difficult to use. Not the most beginner friendly, but once you get blasters down, the S-Blast is no pushover. And that's it for blasters. Slow but powerful, they have a wide variety of range and skill ceilings as well as skill floors, but they're a really good weapon class to try out if you've been into the game for a little while. Dualies. These weapons have the dodge roll ability, and when using them, you'll actually hold 2, one in each hand. They are able to fire bursts of ink out of the backs of them to propel you in any direction you want. In order to use this ability, you have to simply press the B button while moving and shooting in the designated direction you want to go. And after a dodge roll is performed, you can stay still while continuing to fire to access the Dualies turret mode, which combines both reticles into one and makes the Dualies both generally shoot faster and more accurately. Splat Dualies. These are your basic Dualies, similar to a shooter, however with the 2 guns and 2 reticles. You can perform up to 2 dodge rolls in a row. Something to keep in mind is that after a dodge roll, most dually type weapons will have a bit of time before they can move again. With the Splat Dualies, that time is pretty standard, not too long, but can still be risky in some situations. The Splat Dualies take 4 shots to splat, which is pretty standard in normal fire mode, but in turret mode it can splat really quickly. These weapons are very versatile, and I would say easy to use, hard to master. Dapple Dualies. These are your standard lightweight dualies that can splat opponents in just 3 shots. They have very quick but short dodge rolls and can once again dodge roll up to 2 times before getting stuck in place for a short time. The Dapple Dualies also shoot much faster when in turret mode, and it can really melt through the enemy. The only part that can be pretty hard is that it can be hard to close the gap sometimes, but otherwise it's a really good and fun weapon that's easy to use. Gluga Dualies. Gluga Dualies are slower, but not heavier than the Splat Dualies, and they do more damage with the longer range but slower fire rate. They also have the standard up to 2 dodge rolls before getting stuck in place. The Gluga Dualies are actually unique in that its turret form, its damage increases, reducing it from its typical 3-shot splat to just taking 2 shots to splat. The fire rate is also increased in turret mode, but not as much. There is also quite a bit of end lag after its dodge rolls, but still, with its longer range, it shouldn't be too much of a problem unless the enemy has closed the gap on you. The Glugas are a really slow but powerful weapon that can get splats quickly at a decent range. Dualie Squelchers. These dualies are pretty long range with a somewhat fast fire rate and special dodge rolls that let you slide after each one instead of being stuck in place like other dualies. You still only get 2 in a row before the end lag, but the end lag isn't too bad since you get to slide. This weapon takes 4 shots to splat, and unfortunately the fire rate doesn't increase in turret mode, however they still get more accurate. The reason why this is actually because all the way back in Splatoon 1, there was a shooter weapon called the Dual Squelcher. It was similar to the Jet Squelcher, but had a faster fire rate and slightly less range. In Splatoon 2, Nintendo reworked this weapon into a dualie so that it would be more distinct. If you look at the Dualie Squelcher as it fires in turret mode, you'll see that it takes the form of the Dual Squelcher as it fires. Pretty neat. A highly mobile weapon that focuses on distracting the enemy and staying alive. Tetra Dualies. These dualies are super unique because instead of the standard 2 dodge rolls in a row, the Tetra Dualies get a total of 4, and technically they're slides instead of rolls, so the Tetras can continually fire even while rolling. It takes 4 shots to splat, and the turret mode speeds up its fire rate too. Being able to shoot while rolling is super useful because it makes you a harder target while still being able to shoot. There is a lot of end lag after the rolls, so you do have to be careful about that. Dowser Dualies FF. These dualies are really interesting because they have the most range out of all the dualies. They also have a pretty slow fire rate and low damage, taking 4 shots to splat, and sometimes 5 if you don't land all 4 right away. They also only get 1 dodge roll before getting stuck in place, for the longest time out of all the dualies. However, its turret mode is very strong. Its range is lowered, but the fire rate is greatly increased. It uses a lot of ink, so you have to be careful, and the damage is still the same, but the shot speed is so fast that you can eliminate close range threats before they can get you. A really fun and unique weapon that is a bit of an acquired taste. And that's all for the Dualies, a fun weapon class with many ways to shoot and evade the enemy. Brellas. These weapons are basically shotguns with shields. The shield is the Brella canopy, and the shotgun portion is in the shaft. They are probably the most different weapon class in comparison to any of the other classes, and they're a bit more dependent on internet connection than other weapons, but in a stable environment they are a difficult weapon to face off against. They all have pretty moderate range, all of them vary slightly, but mostly fight up close. Splat Brella. This is the basic Brella. You can tap ZR to shoot it, or hold ZR to open the Brella canopy as a shield after firing. You can't shoot while the shield is open, but it can be really useful, especially when you have teammates around. You can protect them and yourself while they shoot at the enemy. You can also send off the shield by holding it open for more than 2 seconds, so you can then follow it and shoot someone from behind it. After it travels a certain distance, or it gets shot enough, it will break. Your Brella will automatically come back over time, and if it gets damaged but not broken, simply keeping the canopy shut will allow it to recover itself on its own over time. This weapon is pretty hard to use, and its damage is a little weird to calculate, as each droplet fired from it deals damage individually. At max damage, it can deal around 85 damage per shot, so it should take 2 shots to splat, although it can be pretty inconsistent, often taking up to 4 shots. Still, it's a good weapon with a lot of potential in the right hands. Brella. This is your heavyweight Brella. Taking context from the name, you can probably tell that this has something to do with the tent. If you thought that, you'd be correct, as the Brella's canopy is a tent, and it's pretty big at that. You can really protect yourself pretty good with it as well as your teammates. This Brella really focuses on sending off its canopy a lot so that it can move in with it or create a distraction for the other team. The tent canopy also has a lot of health, so the enemy probably won't be able to take it down unless they use special weapons or a few of them gang up on it. The shotgun portion of the Brella is also really strong. Up close, hitting all the pellets is enough to splat an opponent in one shot, although it usually takes 2 shots from a distance or if you don't get a good direct hit on the enemy the first time. It's pretty hard to use, it's slow, but it's really good once you get it all figured out. Undercover Brella. This is your lightweight Brella. Its damage is also a bit lower, generally taking 3 to 4 shots to splat someone, but its main gimmick is that it can shoot while its canopy is open. You can of course shoot without the canopy open for slightly better mobility, but being able to shoot while shielding is pretty powerful in concept. The canopy is pretty weak on the undercover Brella, so it breaks pretty easily, but the canopy also regenerates really quickly. It also can't launch its shield. The standard undercover Brella has ink mines which compare pretty decently with the Brella's damage. The Brella kit also has torpedoes which are great for distracting the enemy and comboing damage. Recycled Brella 24. This Brella has a really powerful shot, but the weakest shield out of all the Brellas. The narrow shot spread of the recycled Brella makes it really easy to hit all of the droplets, which deals up to 90 damage, so you only need 10 more to take the enemy out, which can literally be done by any other weapon in the game. Or you can just shoot them again to finish them off. The canopy also launches really quickly with this weapon, and it helps paint the floor with its fast launch speed and wider trail of ink that it leaves behind. This is a really risky rewards type weapon, and it isn't the easiest to use, but overall it can do really well. And that's all the Brellas. They're really fun weapons, but they can also be really frustrating, depends on whose side you're on. Stringers. One of the new weapon classes to Splatoon 3, these weapons are bow and arrow-like weapons that charge pretty similarly to the Charger class, but the projectiles they shoot can be lobbed over walls and some of them even explode after landing. Tri-Stringer. This weapon is the basic stringer. It has long range and fires 3 explosive ink arrows at a time. Filling the first charge ring makes the arrows do more damage, and fully completing the first charge ring makes the arrows explosive. Filling the second charge ring adds range and realigns the arrows so that they fire closer together. If you jump or are in the air before releasing your volley of arrows, you will shoot them vertically instead of horizontally, which can help get more splats or just adjust the orientation of how the arrows will hit the ground. This weapon is really good at helping its team from a distance and shooting over walls to deal lots of damage. It takes 3 charged arrows to get a splat, so if you manage to hit all 3 arrows at once, you'll be met with a satisfying sound. Reflux 450. This weapon is your lightweight stringer. It doesn't have explosive arrows, but just tap shooting this weapon puts a lot of ink on the ground, and it can shoot really fast. Charging it up decreases the amount of ink it puts out, but increases the range, makes the arrows get closer together, and slightly increases the damage. It can also charge at full speed in the air like the Squiffer, and store its charge like a charger. It's a very mobile weapon that can paint a lot and deal a lot of damage. It takes 3 arrows shots to splat someone, so like the tri-stringer, try to line up all 3 and get that satisfying sound. Wellstring V. This stringer shoots 5 arrows at once. It's a heavy weapon, but again, it makes up for it with its power. It takes 5 uncharged arrows to splat, or 3 charged arrows to splat. So if you jump and are really close to someone, it's possible to splat them with a tap shot, although it's pretty hard to do. Once you start charging this thing, you'll notice the arrows going all over the place on the reticles. This is because charging the first ring brings the arrows closer together until it's about 90% full, where they begin to separate again. Once the first ring is fully charged, the arrows become explosive, and it only takes 3 arrows to splat. Charging the second ring gives them more range and separates the arrows even more. Launching a fully charged volley into a team fight can deal a lot of damage, especially with the explosives. If you jump, you can make all the 5 arrows land in the same place with some practice, and 4 explosions from the arrows are enough to splat someone. This weapon is very quirky and fun to use. And that's it for the stringers. Similar to chargers in the way that you use them and their required skill level, but stringers can at least be a bit more help to the team even if you aren't landing many one-shots. Splatanas. These weapons are swords that can fling ink. They all have the ability to slash repeatedly by tapping ZR, and the ability to unleash a charge slash by holding ZR for a small amount of time. Charge slashes can all one-shot splat enemies if the Splatana user physically slices them with their weapon, but this will deal an increased amount of damage to enemies hit with fling ink as well. They can also hold forward while releasing a charge slash to turn it into a dash slash. Splatana Wiper. This is your lightweight Splatana. It excels at painting the ground and dealing small amounts of damage to enemies at a distance, all while moving quickly. It can also be stealthy to sneak up on enemies to slash right through them. It takes 4 standard shots to splat someone, or 2 charge slashes, or 1 charge slash and 2 standard slashes. The dash slash is pretty short ranged, but still pretty useful, a really fun weapon that makes a good introduction to Splatanas. Splatana Stamper. This weapon is known for being hard to use, but also for being really good. It's a little slower than the Wiper, but deals increased damage at a longer range. Its close range slash also has increased range for one-shot potential. It takes 3 standard slashes to splat, or 2 charge slashes, or 1 charge slash and 1 standard slash. The dash slash also goes a bit further and is a bit better than the Wipers. This weapon is really powerful but takes a lot of practice to use. Decavitator. This is the last Splatana. While still being a middleweight weapon, it feels a bit heavier and is a bit slower. It takes the same number of splats to splat as the Splatana Stamper, but it does deal a bit more damage. The charge slash is pretty unique on the Decavitator because instead of being a vertical swing, it stays horizontal, but has increased width and damage. It doesn't have as much range as the Stamper, but it's still pretty good. The Decavitator has a really good charge slash as it's wider, and the one-shot part is longer range than the other 2 Splatanas, so getting one-shots is quite a bit easier. The dash slash on this weapon is also pretty insane, as the Decavitator can dash a really long way in a short amount of time. Use it to get the jump on your enemies. Decavitator is a fun weapon to use despite it being the slowest in its class. And there's all the Splatanas. They are really fun and interesting weapons with a lot of useful ways to attack the enemy and keep opponents on their toes. One other thing I should mention about Splatanas is that if you are close up with an opponent and do a standard slash with any of the Splatanas, it will do increased damage to opponents if you hit them with both the ink from the slash and the Splatana itself. And that's all the main weapons. What a crazy list. On to special weapons. Trizooka. This is the flagship special weapon of Splatoon 3. In the first Splatoon game we had the Ink Zooka, and this is the modern rework for it. After popping it, it can fire up to 3 long-range shots that are made of 3 giant explosive ink bullets. Its hitbox can be a bit inconsistent, but it can one-shot an enemy from a really long way away, and it can be fired almost immediately after popping it, making it hard for opponents to react. This special is really good, even if its damage is a bit inconsistent. Crab Tank. This special weapon is really powerful. When you pop it, the crab tank appears and you get to ride on its back to operate it. You can hold ZR for continuous fire that speeds up over time, or you can press R to shoot explosive shots similar to the Explosher, but with longer range. You can also walk with it, but it moves pretty slowly, especially if you move forward or backwards. If you walk to the sides, you can move much faster. You can also hold ZL to transform into a ball and hide inside the tank. Here you can go up walls, jump, and run people over that try to rush you down. You can release ZL to go back into standard form and start shooting again. Inkjet. When popped, you fly upwards and get a special blaster. You can press ZR to fire it. You can also still access Squid form so you can evade attacks or swim under certain things. You can also tap B to make your inkjet fire a burst of ink to propel you up a bit. Moving around is key with this special because being suspended up in the air can be just like asking for someone to splat you. The blaster shots do have pretty long range, so you can get yourself pretty high up to splat unsuspecting enemies. When the special's duration runs out, the inkjet will explode and send you back to your recall point, which is the last location you were grounded at before you pop the inkjet. It is clearly marked on the ground so enemies can spot your landing zone, so it might be a good idea to try to use this behind cover or equip some shoes with drop roller. Zipcaster. This special is another recall special like the inkjet, although its function is drastically different. You keep your main weapon and get to use essentially one of those sticky, stretchy hand toys to then zipcast yourself across the map. You can zip with the R button, and when you're first getting started with it, you might want to hold down R for a bit before letting go so you know where you're going to be going. If you land on a wall, you'll be able to stick to the wall. If you try shooting, you'll dismount from the wall and fall down. If instead you press B, you'll be able to jump off the wall for some extra height. If you zip through an enemy, you can splat them if you have enough momentum from your zip. You get more momentum the further you zip. You also get a bit of armor while zipping, so you can really try to disorient and splat your enemies while zipping back and forth all around them. The duration of the zipcaster gets reduced every time you zip, and each shot from your main weapon reduces it too. It's based on your ink tank, which, while zip casting, will slowly deplete on its own and you can't recover ink. Once you run out of ink/time, you'll be recalled to your starting location just like the inkjet. The symbol to mark your recall point is different, but the same tips apply here as they did with the inkjet. One other thing to note for both inkjet and zipcaster is that if you want to end your special early, jumping off the stage or trying to touch water will end your specials early, as they have mechanisms to keep you from falling into water or off the stage. So you'll go back to your recall point early. Big Bubbler. This special is really unique. It's the one you start with the Splatashot Jr. and it's pretty simple to use. When you pop it, all you have to do is be grounded, then it will pop up right in front of you. Over time, the bubble will slowly shrink as the duration goes down, and once it runs out, it will pop and disappear. There will be a little device in the center on the ground and a little floating part on the top of the bubble. These are the weak points. If enemies shoot the bubble, it will lose HP and shrink faster, but if they shoot the weak points, it will take damage even faster and break much easier. The Big Bubbler protects anyone in your team that's inside of it from enemy fire coming from outside the bubbler. Enemies can enter the bubbler and some specials can infiltrate it as well, so you do have to be careful there, but overall it's great for both defense and offense. If you look in the bottom part of the bubble, you might also notice that there is what looks like a squid beacon inside. If you saw that, you'd be right. You can actually super jump to the Big Bubbler while it's up. And you or your teammates can jump to it infinitely, at least until the duration is up or it gets broken by the enemy. Jumping to it doesn't affect its duration either, and your landing spot is hidden so long as the bubbler is still there when you land. The bubbler is visible on the map to both teams. Not too big of a thing, but I thought I'd mention it. It's a great special overall. Tacticooler, your competitive essential. This is one of the best specials in the game. When you pop it, you have to throw it with R, and it will pop up and hold 4 drinks that your teammates can walk up to and take. In order to take the drinks, you have to be fairly close to the cooler, and you have to be in human form, so you can't just swim past it and get a drink. Anyways, once you grab the drink, and you can only take one by the way, you are given a bunch of ability perks for a limited time. You are given 29 AP of swim speed and run speed, and 57 AP of Intensify Action, Ink Resistance, Special Saver, Quick Super Jump, and Quick Respawn that works regardless of whether you splatted people or not. It's a pretty insane amount of these abilities, and when they last until you come back to life or get splatted, or until the 17 seconds have passed after taking the drink. If you get splatted with the effect active, the Quick Respawn will ensure you are only splatted for about 1 second, and the Special Saver will ensure you don't lose any of your special, so you can come back with a fully charged special. Otherwise, you can super jump once you've gotten that down to escape danger, and you can jump at blinding speed with the tactical cooler effect. The only downside to having the tactical cooler is that your team needs to go to the cooler itself to get a drink, where someone on the other team could be camping, and once you have the drink, you can't be hidden in squid form because you'll have these little arrows around you until the drink's duration is up. It's a very powerful special that your teammates can get access to. Wave Breaker. Once you pop the Wave Breaker, you can throw it down to deploy it, similarly to the tactical cooler. Once it lands on a flat surface, it will deploy a mini echolocation that will mark everyone on the opposing team within its vicinity. After this, the little ball will go up and then slam back down to cast a wave along the ground, marking and damaging anyone that gets hit by the wave. The Wave Breaker will send a total of 3 waves before it goes away, or if it gets shot too much, it'll break before it can get all 3 out. It's a really good special that can add to fights or mark enemies that aren't paying much attention. One way to avoid the Wave Breaker is to not be grounded as the wave passes by you. You can jump or just be in midair from going off the ledge or using something like an inkjet. Try to use this in areas where enemies are, but also behind cover so that it can't be destroyed as easily. Ink Storm, another deployment special. You can throw it quite a bit further though. It's a device that when it hits a hard surface will shoot up into the sky and summon a cloud of ink that will rain down in the direction the device was thrown in. It rains down on enemies, dealing damage slowly over time. It also lasts quite a while, so make sure to use it so that it travels in an area where the objective is, or where there's going to be a lot of fighting going on, so that it can combo damage with you or your teammates' fire. If you are fighting while in an Ink Storm, you will also be able to recover your health just as fast as you can in squid form, so you can keep fighting without needing to swim away to recover. It's a great special that's pretty easy to use. Splatter Color Screen. This special is a lot like Inkstorm. Instead of a storm device though, it's a type of bottle. When it lands, 2 bubble wands from inside expand to spread out with a bubble between them. The other team can't see through it, but your team can't either, so it's great to move in with your team with by hiding behind it. If an enemy touches the screen, they will take some damage and their screen will go grayscale, making it harder to see, and there will be an ink bubbling sound that disrupts your hearing. It makes the game harder to play until the effects subside. Sometimes you have to go through a screen, but most of the time it's best to try to avoid it. If you squid roll through the screen, you can negate the damage, but not the effects. It's a decent special that requires a bit of team coordination to use well. Super Chumps. This is another deployment special, but it's a bit different. The Super Chumps are launched from a cannon. Instead of throwing it with R, you place it with ZR. After placing it, the cannon will fire quite a few Super Chumps from it that will look like super jump markers to throw off the enemy team. Once they land, they ink the ground, and after a short time, they'll blow up. But they can be shot down during this. They generally aren't lethal because they deal under 100 damage, but they can combo with each other and other weapons really well to get a splat. If you coordinate really well, you can plan it so that you launch super chumps at the same time a teammate is jumping to another teammate, so that their jumps are hidden within the crowd of chumps. It's a great special, especially for inking the ground and for moving in, especially since you can use the chumps once they've landed as mini shields. They're great for inking the ground as well, because they all ink as they land and ink even more after they explode if they aren't shot down. In Turf War, you can launch them far into the enemy base near the end of a game to turn the tides of battle. Reef Slider. When you pop the slider, you'll find yourself on top of an inflatable shark. You'll see pool rails appear to mark the path, and they'll be inking along the ground at the same time. A short time after this, the shark will take off down the path, and once it gets to the end, it will slide to the side and explode, splatting anyone in the radius or dealing damage to people from quite a ways away. You can also manually detonate the Reef Slider a bit early with the ZR button. You do get stuck in place for a bit before the Reef Slider starts and after it explodes, so it can be pretty risky, but it's still a pretty decent special. Triple Splashdown. This special is similar to the Reef Slider, except instead of moving sideways, you'll move up and down. When you pop Splashdown, you'll shoot up in the air and then come crashing down a short time later. But this is Triple Splashdown, which is a more powerful version of the original Splashdown. So when you pop it, 2 fists will appear at about a 45-degree angle directly in front of you that will also come crashing down with you, about a half second after you land. You can also jump before using this special to make the fists go over shorter walls. It's a great special, especially if you're being rushed down or want to get the jump on your enemies. Kraken Royale. This special transforms your squid or octopus form into a large invincible squid or octopus that can deal damage to opponents. You lay ink down as you travel, so you can just swim just as quickly over enemy ink or uninked ground, or even climb uninked walls. When you press B to jump, the Kraken will spin with a splash of ink that damages enemies, or you can hold ZR for a second to charge up, and release to charge through enemies and splat them in one shot. You have to be a bit careful though, because it takes a little bit of time in startup before you completely become invincible, and it can be a bit risky if you don't get away from enemies before you transform back, because you won't be able to shoot right away. The Kraken is a really good special, but it has a few downsides to balance it out. Ultra Stamp. The Ultra Stamp is a powerful stamp. Many call it the hammer. It has 4 ways to use it. Firstly, you can slam it down to splat people in front of you by pressing ZR. You can jump before pressing ZR to do a spin that can wipe people out near you, or even if they're under you or slightly above you. You can also hold ZR instead of just tapping it with the first 2 ways to use it to switch to rush mode, which will have the stamp continually stamp along the ground, crushing enemies in the way, and your final way to use this is to throw it. Throwing it ends the special, so if you pop it and throw it, you don't get it very long, but if you pop it, use the rush mode a bit, then throw it right before it ends, you can potentially get more value out of it. Rush mode is a bit risky because enemies can still shoot you, so sometimes just popping it and throwing it can be very useful in the right situations, but it's almost always a good idea to try to throw your stamp right before its duration runs out. Tentamissiles. Tentamissiles are a powerful displacement tool. When you pop this special, you'll get 2 giant missile launchers on each arm, and a big circle reticle will appear. Every enemy will have a set of parentheses around them, and if they go inside the circle, they will get an X inside those parentheses. If you press ZR when there's an enemy inside the circle, you will fire the Tentamissiles at them. This special is our first of the global range specials. Tentamissiles have unlimited range. They can be used in your base and launched at the enemy in their own base. You can also lock on to up to 5 targets, so if you can get all 4 opponents inside the circle, you can fire missiles on all of them. You can also fire at the Rainmaker barrier, so you can lock on to 5 targets at once. You can't sit still when you have missiles locked onto you, or you will be splatted, so you do have to move. Missiles will mark the ground or walls where they're about to hit, similar to the mark of the torpedo sub, but multiple will come at once, so get out of the way if you can. This special is very powerful, so it has a pretty lengthy cooldown before you can use it again. Back in Splatoon 2, when missiles were introduced, there was no cooldown, and there wasn't when Splatoon 3 first came out too, so you could launch missiles pretty dang fast. It was awful, almost constantly having missiles on you, but at least today missiles are much more balanced. Killer Whale 5.1. This is the other global range special in Splatoon 3. When popped, the Killer Whale 5.1 is 6 speakers that float around behind you. When you use this, you'll see a sort of hexagon-shaped tunnel thing in your visual field, and if you look towards an enemy so that they are inside the hexagon, the whales will lock on to that person and chase them. The way that the whales work is that they start going 2 at a time in 3 segments. You can lock on to up to 3 targets, and you can target the Rainmaker barrier as well. They follow like a shadow, so they will never hit you if you keep walking to the side perpendicular to where the whale is being fired from, but they can be pretty hard to do in the heat of battle. You can lock all 3 sets of whales onto just one person, so if they get touched by all 6 whales at once, it doesn't take long to get splatted. If you lock onto one person with the first or second set of the whales, the rest of them will also lock onto that person, even if they leave your field of view. But you can lock onto other people too. If you don't find anyone in time, the whales will kind of just sweep across the stage, which is not very useful but does have its moments. If multiple people are in the hexagon at once, your whale will lock onto whoever is the closest in the center of the hexagon. One thing to note is that you can run, swim, shoot, etc. while the whales are active and locking onto opponents. It can be a bit tricky to understand how to aim them, but it's a good special that is pretty simple to use once you figure it out. Booyah Bomb. The Booyah Bomb is a really fun special to use. When you pop it, you can float up into the air and have some special armor that builds up around you to prevent you from being splatted for a little bit. Once you're floating up, you can press down the D-pad to say Booyah repeatedly as fast as you can to charge up your Booyah Bomb. Your teammates can also say Booyah repeatedly to help you charge it faster. If they say Booyah, opponents can see them sending Booyahs to the user, so it can give away their location. But it also charges their specials up a bit when they say Booyah, so there's a reward for helping your teammates charge their Booyahs. Once it's charged, you can then throw it pretty far, and once it lands, it will then expand with all the power it got from all the Booyahs that it took to charge it up. It doesn't take long for enemies to be splatted if they get caught in the explosion, and it paints quite a lot, so it's a great special Just be careful not to use it with too many enemies around you so they don't break your armor and splat you. Triple Ink Strike. This special, when popped, gives you a little backpack that releases 3 missiles into the air. You get 3 circular devices that stick to whatever surfaces they hit, and then they summon the ink strikes to strike in that location, creating a twister that can obliterate enemies in an instant. You can throw all 3 devices into different areas to displace enemies, or all in the same to focus the damage or prevent the enemy from getting into an area you don't want them in. It's kind of like 3 mini booyah bombs that expand way into the sky, that also don't need to be charged up. You can also walk around while throwing them, but you can't swim. Triple Ink Strike is a great special, but like the booyah bomb, don't make yourself a sitting duck. Ink Vac. The Ink Vac lets you suck in enemy ink and protect enemies in the vortex of the vacuum. After the duration of the Ink Vac is up, you can then fire back all the ink you absorbed at the enemy team. The more ink you absorb, the larger the shot at the end gets. Enemies caught in the trajectory path of the Ink Vac shot will be splatted instantly, and when the shot lands, it will explode, splatting anyone in the radius. It's a powerful special in the right hands, especially for a coordinated team. The Ink Vac can also deal damage to objects like splash walls, big bubblers, or squid beacons, and it can absorb things like bombs or even other special weapons. It can eat up booyah bombs, ink storm devices, the rain itself. It can absorb some of the triple ink strike, and it can eat up tenta missiles, splatter colored screen bottles, and part of the screen itself, thrown ultra stamps, and it can absorb ink from many other things too. It's great for canceling out other specials and for moving in with your team and protecting your teammates. And with that, there's a basic overview on all the main, sub, and special weapons and the different weapon classes. Phew, what a list. There are so many amazing weapons to choose from. If one isn't your style, there aren't many other drastically different weapons to try out. Before I move on, I want to touch on weapon freshness. As you play the game, you might notice little pop-ups letting you know you've raised your freshness level. Every weapon kit has its own freshness level, so if you play a lot with the Sploosh-o-matic, but not much with the Carbon Roller Deco, your freshness level will be higher on the Sploosh. Basically, each star is like a trophy for using each weapon. For instance, I recently hit 70 weapons with 4 stars. 4 stars takes a while to get to, with each star power taking longer and longer to achieve. In order to boost your freshness to raise the weapon star count, you can play Turf War or one of the Anarchy modes. In Turf War, your weapon freshness is added based on the amount of P you inked, and in Anarchy modes it's based on the score. A KO adds 2500 to your freshness meter. I don't want you to confuse this with Turf Freshness meter, as this is also weapon dependent, but is only used and calculated in Turf War. Basically how this works is when you win a game, freshness is added, and when you lose, freshness is subtracted. The number is there for your freshness level, and the word is your freshness category. Each weapon starts out as dry 0.0, but you can raise it to raw, fresh, and super fresh. In super fresh, you can continue to raise your number up to 99, and once you pass 50, the flag will turn gold. It's a pretty fun way to gauge how you turf with a given weapon. Anyways, back to weapon freshness and all the other modes. Once you get to 1 star, you'll get an extra Sheldon license to purchase another weapon. Once you hit 2 stars, you'll get a sticker of the weapon. Once you hit 3 stars, you'll get a holographic sticker of the weapon. 4 stars will give you a badge to show off how much you love the weapon. 5 stars, 6 stars, 7 stars, 8 stars, 9 stars, and 10 stars also all give you badges that sort of progressively get more fancy. See how much you can raise your freshness levels on all your favorite weapons. Next up on the agenda is to briefly go over how to play each of the 4 Anarchy modes that you unlock once you reach level 10. Yeah, I think I might be a little past that. I definitely don't play this game much. Firstly, Splat Zones. This is probably the most beginner-friendly of the 4 modes. It's also the most similar to Turf War for newer players. There is always going to be 1 or 2 zones in the middle or around the center of the stage that you must ink over to take control of. In order to take control of a zone, you and your teammates have to ink at least 75% of it. Once in control, the zone will immediately completely cover in your team's ink color, and this timer at the top of the screen will begin counting down. If over half the zone is inked in the other team's color, your team will lose control until you either ink 75% of it to take it back, or the other team covers it 75% of the way to cover the zone and take control. When the zone flips sides, whichever team had it last will receive a penalty timer for half the time that they were in control. So if your team ticks it down to say 50 from the start, when the other team takes it, you will see a little plus 25 under your team's timer, which means you'll have to hold the zone for an extra 25 ticks before you can continue making the counter go below 50. Your goal is to try to get your team's timer to 0, or as close as you can get. As long as by the end of the battle, your team has fewer ticks left than your opponent's, you win. Tower control. This mode is really fun. Here you want to try to ride the tower that appears in the middle of the map to the other team's side. In order to do this, all you have to do is have at least one person on your team standing on it. The tower will then follow the rail marked by this light up line. There are 2 to 3 checkpoints depending on the map along the path that your team must get through to continue to progress. When the tower gets to a checkpoint, it will stop moving, and if you see this circle that shows up, you can see how much longer the checkpoint will take to get through. You'll notice as you're moving the tower, the count will drop up here, and it will still be dropping through checkpoints. If you get off the tower, it will come to a stop, and someone will have to get back onto it to continue making it move. If the enemy gets on the tower, it will start moving the other direction towards your team's base. Try to stop them by shooting the enemies off the tower. If the tower is stopped midway through a checkpoint, the game will count the count that you would reach by the time it stops, so if you make it further into a checkpoint than the other team does, that's good. If you make it back to a checkpoint though, you'll have to go through the entire thing again, so try to make it through checkpoints before your push ends so that you can make it further down the rail. Your goal is to try to make it to the goal, but as long as you make it further down the tower path than your opponents, you win. Rainmaker. This game has somewhat similar ideals to tower control. However, instead of standing on a tower, you pick up this weapon called the Rainmaker and carry it yourself towards the enemy goal. The Rainmaker starts in the middle of the stage with a barrier around it, so no one can pick it up. You have to shoot the barrier in order to pop it, which will create a huge explosion that will splat any opponent that's too close to it. Once the barrier is popped, you're free to pick it up by simply running into it. Once you have it, you won't be able to use your main, sub, or special weapon again until you lose it. The only ways to lose the Rainmaker are to either get splatted or make it to a checkpoint. Checkpoints in Rainmaker are pretty different than the ones in Tower Control, as you only have to go through one. Some stages have 2 checkpoints, but they are just there for different options so that you can take the Rainmaker through different paths. Once you reach the checkpoint with the Rainmaker, you'll drop it on top of the podium, and the barrier will reappear around the Rainmaker again, meaning you need to pop it again in order for someone to pick it up. Once you get the Rainmaker again, you just need to make it to the goal podium, which is pretty far into the enemy base usually. Despite that, you can't use your main sub or special weapon, you can use the Rainmaker, so you're not completely defenseless. It's not the easiest weapon to use, but it is really good in the right hands. You first have to hold ZR to charge it up, and once it's charged, indicated by the charge sound stopping, the Rainmaker will be glowing brightly and the reticle will change. You can then release the ZR button to release a powerful blast. Hitting someone with this fully charged shot as it's flying through the air does around 60 damage, and once the shot lands, it will explode, dealing a massive 180 damage to any enemy caught in the blast. You can also release the shot before it's fully charged. However, it will not be as strong and it won't have the explosion after the shot lands. It can still be useful to paint the ground in front of you though. You might also notice how when you first fire the Rainmaker, there is a bit of recoil that pushes you back a bit. Be careful with this, as it can cause you to fall somewhere you don't want to, but it can also be used to your advantage. If you look backwards and shoot while crossing something that you can't ink, you can make the recoil push you a little faster. You can also use it to avoid shots or bombs. The closer to the checkpoint and the goal podium that you get, the more points you tick off. You want to make it all the way to the goal for a win, but as long as you make it further than the other team, you win. Clam Blitz, by far the most complicated mode in the game. It's also the most team-oriented mode, but it can also be the most fun. Clam Blitz is a mix of American football, basketball, and Splatoon. You basically run around the stage by picking up clams, by running them over, and you have to score them in the enemy's clam basket. However, you can't just shoot in clams individually. Once you've collected 8 clams, they automatically combine to create a power clam. A power clam can be used to break the enemy barrier. You can then throw clams and power clams with A or L. Once the barrier is broken, you can throw in regular clams or more power clams. Each clam is worth 3 points, and every power clam is worth 20, so it can be sometimes better to score 7 individual clams and pick up the 8th later so that you can score a few extra points. but if the enemy is rushing you, just throw in a power clam so that you can get a lot of points quickly. Throwing in individual clams takes a little while, so when the enemy is fighting you, it's important to avoid enemy shots while shooting in clams, or try to take the enemy down so that you can score more freely. It all depends on the moment. You'll notice that like the other Anarchy modes, both teams start with 100 and you try to score the clams to get the count down. You might also notice when the clams basket's barrier is broken, there is a little circle that acts as a timer. Every time you throw in a clam, a little bit of time is added, and if you throw in another power clam, the entire timer is refilled. Once the timer ends, the basket will shoot up, the barrier will reform, and the enemy will get a free power clam, deemed as the pity clam. When your team's barrier is broken, you need to stop the enemy from scoring, but you can't just run to the enemy's barrier as the other clam basket will raise up, preventing the team that has its barrier open from scoring until that barrier closes again, because as soon as the clam basket's barrier closes again, the other basket will then come down. The one that just closed, however, will stay raised for 10 seconds, preventing that team from scoring again until it comes back down. You can also pass clams to teammates if you want to help them make a power clam. You can also super jump with clams or a power clam, so if you have a teammate over by the enemy basket, you can jump to them and score right away. Just remember that power clams can't be thrown quite as far as regular clams, so using the little humps near the clam basket can really help you gauge how close you need to be, and you can for sure score as long as you're standing on one of the little humps. If you get the score down to 0, it's an instant win. Otherwise, as long as your team has gotten the score down lower than the enemy has, you win. And with that, there's all the Anarchy modes, also known as the ranked modes. Hopefully this video has helped you understand them, at least at a basic level. I'll have individual videos out for each of the 4 modes in the future that will go into much more depth and detail and have many more advanced tips and tricks in them. The next video is going to be about Splatfests and an intro to the music of Splatoon. So, like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to stay up to date with when the next video drops. Until next time.